Hello and welcome to the Libertarian Perspective, a discussion of state, local, and national issues with a libertarian flair. My name is Doug Klippel. I'm the former two-time state chairman of the Libertarian Party of Florida. We appreciate you tuning into our broadcast. With me, a couple of regular partners in crime. You've seen him here on the show before. Richard Nader here back with us. Richard, we appreciate you showing up with a nice bright red tie. We're not going to mistake you.
Thank you very much. I try to get noticed where I can. And sitting next to Jonathan here, you kind of have to do something special.
That's right. And Jonathan Loesche, welcome back to you as well. Great to have you back.
Thank you for having me back again.
Yeah. Now, all of you out there, you need to keep the fan letters coming for these guys. I mean, we've already got a big bushel full, you know, from the last showing or whatever. So we don't want their ego to take a hit. So you have to write and let them know how much you appreciate them being on the broadcast. As always on the Libertarian Perspective show, we have a full litany of things to discuss. Let's go ahead and put the overhead up in terms of our topics that we're going to talk about today. The first thing is Occupy Wall Street, this movement that started in New York but has now spread to many other cities, Washington, D.C., Boston, Los Angeles, Atlanta.
Even here in Jacksonville.
Even had one here in Jacksonville. So we're going to talk a little bit about whether that's here to stay or not. The next one, which is called Operation Full Speed Ahead, is actually something called Operation Fast and Furious. A little bit of a typo on my part when I was putting these slides together, but it's correctly labeled when we get to the slide a little bit later on. We're going to talk about that operation from the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, and what it means for the tenure of Attorney General Eric Holder. We're going to turn our attention to some local issues, talk about Mayor Brown, and do we actually have something to look forward to here, the end of the JEDC, or is this going to be like the Hydra, that monster where you cut one head off and you get two in its place? We're going to talk a little bit about that. And then finally, local redistricting, which I actually refer to as the ultimate political football, gerrymandering, and exactly what is a compact district. So guys, quite a few things to chat about, and let's just go ahead and roll right into our first topic of discussion, this whole Occupy Wall Street thing. And Jonathan, as you mentioned, we've had a little bit of a local flavor of it here in Jacksonville. For those that are unfamiliar with the movement, let's go ahead to the next slide. It did go ahead, it started in New York. It's like I mentioned just a second ago, it spread to other cities and even worldwide, you know. I'm sure it's over in France. They love nothing but a good protest, even if they don't know what they're protesting about. It's largely been unfocused and unorganized up to this point. There are a wide variety of backgrounds. Of course, now we've had the strong union presence, particularly in the Washington, D.C. and New York City areas. It largely has been peaceful, although conflicts with police are increasing. And you know, one of the interesting things about this movement is that it's been very unfocused, and there's really not one official head, but there was a bit of a, I don't know if I call it a manifesto, but a list of demands that came out. So I'm going to put those up real quick and then just get your reaction to some. Let's go ahead to the next slide with the demands. Restoration, I'm not sure exactly what that means of a living wage, at $20 an hour minimum wage, which is kind of interesting. Institute universal health care system. Guaranteed income regardless of employment. I'll be very interested in your reaction to that. Free college education. Fast track the end of fossil fuels while bringing alternative energy to the forefront. $1 trillion in infrastructure spending, followed by another $1 trillion in environmental restoration projects. Immediate across-the-board debt forgiveness. Pretty interesting. Go ahead to the next slide. Outlawing credit reporting agencies, allowing workers to sign a union ballot at any time to indicate their desire to unionize. Thank you to all the unions for their late entry into the Occupy Wall Street movement. I'm sure that's partially their desires there. A racial and gender equal rights amendment. Open borders immigration, something some libertarians at least would agree to, and then bringing USA elections up to international standards regarding paper ballots and recounting. Certainly another issue that a lot of libertarians would talk about in terms of whether or not we can actually verify some of the technological votes that are going on. So, you know, we have a whole litany of demands up there, at least that have come out from one set of spokesperson from this cause. So, Richard, go ahead and starting with you. Your overall take on Occupy Wall Street and your reaction to the list of some of these demands.
Well, the concept, when I first heard about it and it first broke out, I thought it was interesting and that perhaps even something new. The Tea Party, of course, wasn't new. It was just a different group. But it turns out this is neither one of those things. It's neither interesting particularly or particularly new. It seems to be 1968 just kind of rehashed with the same old demands. Of course, the decimal points on dollars have moved. But generally speaking, they want free everything. They want, you know, free food, free meals, free lives, free college. And they expect it all to mean something, and they want the government to spend a bunch of money that they don't want to have collected. They want the government to spend $1 trillion on infrastructure, $1 trillion in environmental restoration projects, but they don't want corporations bailed out by the government. And I'm thinking, well, where are these $2 trillion going to go? Who does infrastructure? Who does environmental restoration? They're companies. That's where that money goes. They hire companies. They don't send out government workers to do it. Unless that's the whole idea, is everybody, all the companies go away, everybody goes to work for the government, everybody gets 20 bucks an hour, and everybody goes and does this stuff. It's like, now it all makes sense, but that's not where I want to live.
How would you implement some of the specific things in here around forgiving all debt, for example? I mean, what kind of impact would that have on the world financial market if somehow that could be done?
If I was given the job of, here, Mr. Nader, your job is to arrange to forgive all debt, I would go to the banks and I would say, okay, bank, you have to forgive all the debt that you're owed. And in return, you will be forgiven all debts that you owe. And that would mean the bank gets left owning the buildings that they're in and the cash that's in their safe. Because what is a deposit in a bank account but a loan? Yeah. So I mean, the funny thing, these people are demanding that we return to a dead chicken for 3 rocks economy with 260 million people in the United States alone. Yeah. We can't live like that.
Yeah, very interesting. Now Jonathan, I know that obviously the media can, easily focus on signs of people that are holding signs that say end capitalism or, eat the rich and all this. I mean, all of us have seen some of those signs on the media, so the sensationalistic part of the media can always gravitate toward that. I'm sure that there's a lot of this movement that is probably a little bit more moderate, a little bit more centered. Yeah. And of course, you even went to the local version of this here in Jacksonville. So I went to
the Occupy Jacksonville here and to the magic of time travel with this show. I'll also be at the one on the 15th, along with several other members of the Libertarian Party. And as I continue to have them, I will probably continue to go to them.
What did you find?
I found a very mixed crowd. Like I said, I mean, there were several people, then capitalism, blah 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 blah. But that seemed, I think, to be a small minority. Most of these people, I get sort of a general vibe of the early Tea Party. These people are simply angry and fed up, and they want answers. And if the Libertarian Party can come out there and provide those kinds of answers, and these people are willing to listen. I'm running for Florida State House of Representatives. I need 500 petitions to get on the ballot. I got over 50 signatures there. There was some 200 people so over almost a quarter of the people there. Therefore, you would think are willing to listen to the libertarian message. And like I said, I think if we have a presence there, they will be willing to listen. This isn't just these demands, like you said, this was just one person making these demands. This wasn't as a group, as a whole. We can have a voice at the table and help shape what this movement is to become. If we're not there, then it will be hijacked by socialists. So I think I disagree. I think this is a very interesting movement, something the LP should have its teeth sunk into.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we would have to step back and say the fact that something like this would even materialize certainly means that there's a large segment of the population that feels alienated, not involved, feels like the system is somehow rigged or whatever, And probably part of our work, some of it is probably around education or whatever, but some of it is probably listening to some of these real concerns. I mean, I certainly think that as libertarians, we would agree that the collusion that we really need to avoid is the collusion of big government and big business. I mean, that is the worst situation of all worlds, and unfortunately that is a situation that we find ourselves in today. As a matter of fact, there's a graphic that we're going to put up here that I actually stole from our friends over at the Cato Institute. I don't know how well it's actually going to show up on the TV there, but basically the left-hand side of this graphic talks about what the Occupy Wall Street protesters are upset about, and what they're upset about are large corporations that have way too much power, and you certainly hear that anti-corporatist message in a lot of the signs and a lot of the spokespersons. On the right-hand side, it basically says, what is the Tea Party upset about? And what they're upset about is the government has way too much power, and where those two things intersect on our chart is large corporations lobby for the government to have more power, return the government enacts laws and regulations that are favorable to large corporations. Now, certainly as libertarians, we can say, look, if you're going to have a federal budget that's $3 or $4 trillion, all right, if you're going to have government at all levels, spending huge amounts of money, obviously large corporations, people with political influence, are going to get in there and influence that process. So certainly, if anything, our message has to be to disentangle that. But yet, I think a lot of these people that are in the Wall Street crowd, they really see the government as being the institution, the vehicle to solve all these problems.
Well, as long as government's got a big bed, there'll be people wanting to climb into it. And the people that are best able to will, and use that position to expand their marketplace. The purpose of a corporation is to deliver a service or product to market and earn a return for its investors. Those investors are just people. The people that do the work are people, the customers are people, the investors are people. The problem with the relationship between big government and big business isn't business. If there was no place for them to go to try to buy influence because government was not empowered to provide that influence, then there would be no corruption. A government that is severely restricted by its own rules, by its own constitution, leaves these companies no place to go but the marketplace in order to cut out their share of the market.
Yeah, well put. And Jonathan, I know that from our previous times where you've been on the show, you actually came to the libertarian movement from the left, from the Democrat side. So, I mean, from your perspective, is it a matter of us educating people around free market alternatives and getting them to see that there are ways of solving things?
I think, like I said, I think it's the idea of we've been sold in the mass media, we've been sold a phony idea of what is a free market system. I know plenty of people who still think our current medical insurance system is a quote-unquote free market system. I know quite a few people think that buying out the government to put in regulations is part of a free market system, and really it isn't. And I think that's the idea, like I said, sort of more of an educational perspective of it. And as well, like I said, I think it is two sides of the same coin, because businesses are naturally going to try and buy off the government because that's just what they do. But it is our job in place to restrict the government to where they can't do that. So,
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. It always, and I think we've even shared this analogy, earlier broadcast. But it's always interesting to me that so many people have never really stopped to think about, what is the role of government? What should government do? What shouldn't it do? I think a lot of times our educational system just kind of pervades this paradigm, if you will, of the government all-knowing, all-seeing. The government has its fingers in everything, and people never really stop to critically think about, what their government should be doing. The old Will Rogers lines, good thing we don't get all the government we pay for. I think most people would have a very hard time defining boundaries around where they think a government ought to operate. And, I will sometimes say to people, if we had somehow gotten into the situation where the government ran grocery stores, all right, let's say that was somehow just a government function, and then people talked about privatizing that. I mean, you'd have people screaming, we'll never have any food, nothing will be available, the food won't be safe, and all this kind of stuff. And instead what we have with a free market paradigm is we've got all these variety of grocery stores providing wide variety of products at ever competing prices and all this kind of stuff. But a lot of times people just don't have that kind of a mindset or that kind of a paradigm.
Absolutely. Once government, and this is the big danger of Obamacare, is once government is entrenched in a place that used to be a marketplace and no longer is, it is really difficult to get things turned back around and recover freedom from that enslavement. It usually takes revolution, and a revolution based out of what is essentially a life and death financial arrangement with insurance companies and doctors and patients. Once we're stuck in that mold, getting out of it would be, I believe, almost impossible.
Yeah, well put. Well, Jonathan, I mean, as you look in your crystal ball and you look at this movement or whatever, I mean, if you had to prognosticate on what you think the overall outcome is going to be, what do you see?
The jaded, cynical part of me says that just as how the Tea Party has been hijacked by the Republicans, I think this will ultimately be hijacked by the Democrats, and just as the Tea Party has become sort of the shock troops to get Republican candidates in office, the Occupy Wall Street people will be the shock troops for Obama in 2012. The hopeful part of me says that maybe these people can be persuaded to, but so We'll see. Then again, like you said, Mother Nature might take out this whole movement by December. So.
Yeah, but the inclement weather might have a chilling effect, literally in this case, on the actual boots on the street. Richard, what do you see? What do you think?
I think Occupy Wall Street, this whole movement, and the optics of it, even with positive press and with a favorable national media, is going to end up swinging a lot of moderates from the left column to the right column, and may turn what might be a victory into something of a landslide next November.
Well, good. Well, we'll have to have you back on a future show a few months down the road and kind of see which one of your prognostications turned out to be the most accurate. Well, I think that one of the things that to me was very poignant. I almost don't think you could have planned this out if you wanted to. Was the fact that we have these Occupy Wall Street protests going on right now with so many people vilifying corporate America and holding up hateful signs about CEOs and CEO pay and all this type of stuff or whatever. And of course, during last week we marked the death of an American giant, Steve Jobs, the co-founder of Apple Computer, and the tributes were immediate and very justified in terms of comparing him to Edison and other great inventors because of his insight and his talents and his ability to bring products to market that really touched all of our lives or whatever. And we do have a slide, what I very, very facetiously titled Profiling the Evil CEO. And to me it was just a very poignant time because, I'm sure that if you went out to that crowd, say the Occupy Wall Street crowd, certainly at least for those, 50 or below, probably all of them would have a product that's created at least in part by this man. And when you think about the impact that he has had on society in terms of how much productivity has he increased in businesses worldwide, how has he enhanced the quality of people's lives, how many jobs has his company directly and indirectly created, how much has his company contributed to the economy, I would say that contribution far exceeds any government program that you can actually put up and try to hold side by side compared to it. And wouldn't we be better off if we encouraged more Steve Jobs as opposed to not encouraging him?
Well, in the early 80s, Steve Jobs and Bill Gates, I was familiar with their work from early in it because I got into the computer business. But shortly after these two gentlemen did. In fact, my work in computer science predates the release of the Apple IIe and of Microsoft Windows. I've watched these two gentlemen's careers. They didn't steal. They didn't cut into other people's business. They created a marketplace. Every company that exists on this planet at some point created the marketplace that they work in. They didn't just build a product and build a better product and undercut their competition. They actually changed the way people do everything. And if you listen to an interview of Steve or Bill from 1982 or 1983, they will tell you they sleep in their offices at night. Steve Jobs started his business in his mother's garage. Okay, they set out not just to build a product, but to change the world, and they succeeded in changing the world. And that is America. That is the free market, and that is the thing that these people, all wearing iPods and carrying their smartphones, that's what they're protesting. So if the protesters now had their way in the 80s, we wouldn't just not have Apple. We wouldn't have microcomputers. We would still be using phones with cords. We would still be, a computer would be in a room the size of this studio. Okay, these guys revolutionized the world, revolutionized life in this society, and every company seeks to do that with the products that they produce.
Yeah.
I can't sing his praises for lack of a voice deep enough. And Occupy Wall Street people, they want to say we're the 99%ers. Well, you 99%ers, you are the market. that these guys are producing their product for. You benefit from the purchase of those products. They benefit from producing them. You take your well-earned cash, you give it to them. They take their neat product, they give it to you. It's a fair deal. If it wasn't, you wouldn't buy the product. There's enough products out there that didn't go anywhere because it wasn't worth the price it cost.
Yeah.
So but every successful business, that's what they do.
Yeah.
And until very recently, both of those companies tried really hard to stay away from politics, to stay out of bed. And they were driven into bed as far as they got in the 90s, when the large parties, who will remain nameless, insisted that if they don't get in bed and start paying the bill, that they were going to be facing charges from the Attorney General of the United States.
That's absolutely well put, and probably a very interesting topic for another show. It's absolutely, I remember that very well. And so, Jonathan, certainly we're not going to excuse corporate excesses. There certainly have been cases in the media and things where corporations and CEOs have not behaved well. But did you find any irony in the fact that you had the death of somebody like Steve Jobs when all this is going on?
I mean, Apple is the official brand of the hipster, and probably 2/3 of the people who were at these Occupy Wall Streets have an eye something, whether it's in their pocket or a Mac or an iPad or something. And the man had plenty of his faults. He shipped plenty of jobs overseas and other things like that. But like I said, for a quarter of a century, his company drove consumer technology. And even though I'm not a personal fan of Apple, hey, I can't, like I said, the man was an innovator, and you can't take away what he did for this company or for this country. So,
yeah. So Thomas Edison, Alexander Graham Bell, and I think certainly Steve Jobs has his rightful place up there in terms of leaving his thumbprint. And just quite a legacy, and again, really interesting that all this time where corporate America is really in the crosshairs, so to speak, that his passing would again remind us the power of capitalism and the powers of corporations to do good, not only in terms of charitable works, and he personally was very philanthropic, and Apple's been very philanthropic, but just their impact on the quality of life and productivity, just absolutely incredible. So. All right, well, we do have some upcoming events, and I want you guys to be able to plug the website and all that kind of stuff so that folks that are out there listening to the broadcast can hear a little bit about local libertarian activities. We're figuring out the calendar ahead of time. We think the next meeting is the 20th of October, Thursday the 20th, and one of you take it away and tell the folks what they can do.
Yes, October 20th is our next meeting. It's at the Golden Corral on Southside Boulevard. We'll be having a representative from the River City Pride group there. It is a local gay pride initiative, and we'll be talking about gay rights both in Florida and Jacksonville in general. And then our meetings are always on the third Thursday of every month. Also, the 22nd, we will be at the Nullify Now convention, which is in Jacksonville at the Omni Hotel. The Libertarian Party of Florida as a whole is going to have a booth there. So, and then, like I said, that's about all it for on the horizon for right now.
And the web URL again?
www.jaxlp.com. It's up on the screen.
Fantastic. Yeah, great.
Come meet Jonathan and I. Will both be at both of those events this Sunday and next Saturday. I would like to reiterate jaxlp.com. These events that we do and the outreach that we do, the print costs, the shows like this, the booths, the things that we do as a party to reach out to people, to spread the message, to put up candidates and fight for liberty costs, and we are seeking donations. So come to jaxlp.com or call 904-404-9103. Please make a donation. A $1 donation is gratefully accepted.
All right. Well, thank you for that.
Yes.
Well, believe it or not, guys, we're actually got like 5-6 minutes left in the program. It's amazing how time flies when we're having fun, but we do have some other stuff to get to. The appropriately titled Operation Fast and Furious on the next slide. Let's go ahead and take a quick look. Just a very, very quick overview for those viewers who've not heard about this. ATF, actually should be ATF, alcohol, tobacco, and firearms agents sold guns to Mexican gun traffickers to expose drug cartels. Ran from 2009 to the latter part of 2010. Basically a couple of thousand guns, and unfortunately these guns have now been traced back to crime scenes in Mexico, some of them very, very violent crime scenes. There were, we'll go ahead to the next slide, please. There were some alcohol, tobacco, and firearm agents who raised alarms about this. They were forbidden from their superiors by saying anything about it. They were told this has been blessed at the highest levels. Actually, a Border Patrol agent and an immigration officer were both killed by these guns. And the Attorney General claims that he has only recent knowledge of this operation, but there are internal records that show he was briefed all the way back in July 2010 about this program. Richard, your reaction to this program? Is this something the government should be doing?
Actually, this is something the government should be fighting. This is where this ATF should actually be trying to prevent this kind of thing from happening. The funny thing is that in order to distract from news about Fast and Furious, the Justice Department released information yesterday and more today about a plot to assassinate some foreign diplomats in Washington, D.C. Right. That involve the very same drug cartels. So it's like they can't get away from it, even in trying to point the finger someplace else and go, hey, look, they still end up. The Zeta cartel in Mexico is part of a plot to assassinate 2 foreign diplomats in Washington, D.C., and they're trying to report on that in order to distract from the fact that we sold them the weapons that they probably were going to use to try to do that.
This is just a massive symptom of our failed drug policy. If our drug policy wasn't as screwed, the cartels wouldn't have the money, they wouldn't have the power, because where do they get the power from? They get it from selling drugs. And the ATF, this goes all the way back to, you can look at some of their operations trying to infiltrate the Hells Angels and all of those botched things. The ATF has just a terrible track record on this, and this is just no reason for government to be doing anything like this scale. So this is what.
And Richard, what does your crystal ball say about the future of Attorney General Eric Holder?
In any other administration in the previous 43 presidents of this country, I would say he's 6 weeks ago would have resigned just to cover his president's behind. But that doesn't seem to happen here. So I have no idea. I think you'll probably hold on for the next, 16 months?
Yeah.
and roll out with everybody else. I mean, if everybody that was tainted at this point in this administration were to resign, there would be weeds growing in the East Lawn.
Yeah, Jonathan, your outlook on that?
I think at this point, the political damage, I think he's gone in the next 2 months.
Yeah, he's always been kind of an interesting figure to me. Very interesting background, Eric Holder, and this is certainly not the first time that controversy has been associated with his name.
I don't know when it wasn't. He dismissed the charges against the Black Panthers almost immediately upon taking the job, and has been instrumental in every law enforcement related hose-up in the last 2.5 years, and quite frankly, if he was going to get fired for incompetence, it happened.
Should have already happened.
2011 or 2010.
Believe it or not, guys, we're actually at the end of the broadcast, so we'll catch up with Alvin Brown, the JEDC, next time. So thank you guys very much for appearing. Thank you for viewing The Libertarian Perspective. Catch us Wednesdays at 7 o'clock here on Comcast, other associated times when you're channel surfing. Look for us as well. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you next time on The Libertarian Perspective.